One moment. Give me a second here. Hi, this is Anna Imagination with a Healing Garden, and thank you so much for joining me for communication and boundary classes. For those of you who do not know me, I am a philosopher, psychologist, and sociologist of 30 years. I know my shit. And this is a piece, a fraction of triadic healing that I use to basically help people through understanding exactly what's going on with their lives and how to take control of their situation. Every time I go through anything with triadic healing, every time I'm working with a case study, every time I'm talking to anybody, 100% of the time, the solution comes down to set a boundary, communicate, talk. And well, that's kind of a problem for most people because first, we've been conditioned that talking is dangerous. We have a significant fear of talking because in most cases, talking resulted in abuse or neglect or abandonment or some sort of punishment. So we have this association in our head that talking is dangerous. That's the first problem. And I've heard so many people who have tried talk therapy and then they come back and they say things like, it doesn't work for me, I've tried it, it doesn't, it's ineffective. There is a massive disconnect because of communication happening with communication and our mental health today. And this is really the core of it. Every solution, everything that mental health comes down to keeps coming back to communication and boundary setting. So the first thing I'm going to talk about in this course is the importance of communication, what it really is and what you're really doing with your brain when we talk about communication. The big thing that I've noticed, and this is the problem, is we're going to divide the world for simplification purposes. For examples, we're going to divide the world into two peoples. Now, everything is on a spectrum. Everything is not black or white. Everything is on this absolute spectrum. So that while I give you a black and white, while I give you an extreme of one end or the other, I want you to understand that there is a gray spectrum in between and that people, every person falls on this spectrum. Now, we are abused usually by the extremes. And to retaliate or to reciprocate, to respond to that extreme, we go the other way. And basically it's somebody over here hits you, so you go all the way over here to avoid being hit again, and that puts you in the opposite extreme. We see this very, very often. This is basic psychology. It's how it works. And then when you heal, you realize that there's an actual in-between, and that's where you really want to be. Because that's when you start to see a situation for what it really is, and you basically, it changes your perspective so you're no longer responding out of trauma. So communication, the problem with communication is we have this underlying fear with it. We have an association of abuse. And we also have the societal gaslight, children should be seen and not heard. That is embedded into us from the time we are about 2 or 3 years old. I'm also, at the moment, doing a lot of research on social anxiety. Absolutely one of my favorite topics to focus on. And what I've noticed with social anxiety in other people, and I had to overcome this as well, is an understanding that, well, we basically lack the knowledge to navigate and maneuver conversation effectively. So there's a lot of, I don't know how to have a conversation with someone. And what ends up happening is the first thing I noticed is even as adults, we don't know how to politely interrupt. Interruption is a big thing that we run into. It's something that is necessary in social situations, and no one really is comfortable doing it because we've been taught that it's rude, especially as children. And instead of teaching adults, teaching children how to interrupt properly or politely, they're told to just not interrupt at all. Now, what this ends up doing is it leaves them voiceless. And this is the problem. The other issue is our abusers turn us into something that I like to call secret keepers. I borrowed that term from Rowling's Harry Potter books. A secret keeper is somebody, basically, when you are abused, the abuser requires your cooperation. And to ensure that you have, or that they have your cooperation, what they end up doing is basically burdening you with the concept that you aren't allowed to tell anyone. No one's going to believe you anyway. If you tell somebody, I'm going to hurt this person you love. So they'll blackmail you or they'll threaten you if you open up and speak about it. And that's to guarantee your cooperation. So without realizing it, when we are abused, we are actually burdened with this massive silence, this burden of it's our responsibility to psychologically protect our abuser from any consequence by not talking about it. That's a big one. That's a huge one right there. And then you've got a projection of a common parenting problem where you have an uneducated or a toxic parent who doesn't quite understand how authority or power works. So they instigate their established power and authority through control. This is actually not at all what authority is. And what ends up happening is to project their control onto a child, the parent will teach the child, don't question me. So there's also an association of questions equals a challenge of power. And this is because the parent is actually not authoritative, not in control. They are just projecting their control onto the child ineffectively by removing their voice and putting the child in a position to associate asking questions with challenging authority. So that many of us, when we become adults, will have a question and we will be too afraid to ask because we don't want to come off as challenging authority of a boss when we are just looking for clarity. So there's a lot of things like that that's just embedded into our psychology just because of this is how parents are taught in our society to parent. And it's not really taught, it's more like just monkey see, monkey do, and it's a lot of copycatting. It's a lot of repetition. So we see a lot of parents who are just repeating the same thing. And then parents will ask for advice. And we'll notice that everyone's doing the same thing, so we'll copy that. Two mothers will be talking in a grocery store. Kids will come over and pull on mommy's clothes. Hey, I'm talking, don't interrupt. And it's that little thing right there, don't interrupt, that computes in our little brains going, oh, interruption is bad. I've made mommy unhappy. And now here we are as adults at a cocktail party, and we still have that programming, don't interrupt, don't interrupt. And it's basically mindless parenting. I'm going to call it that. Mindless parenting. I'm going to totally take that from my parenting classes. Mindless parenting that results in a lot of programming in our brains that tells us we're not supposed to talk. We're not supposed to speak. So that by the time we are 20 years old, we are voiceless. There's also this pecking order, this hierarchy, that children are less than adults. This is a big problem. The reason why this is a big problem is because children end up growing up with this concept, this mentality of, I am less than, I am not as valuable, I am not as important as everybody else. Now, this isn't something that when you hit 18, you suddenly get the stamp of approval and you're suddenly in your full glory of, I have the right to talk now because I'm an adult. That's not how the subconscious mind works. What ends up happening is we become silent, we grow from being silent children who don't know how to communicate to being adults who are silent, who don't know how to communicate. Because our adulthood life is an exact replica of what we were taught as children. It's not this magical solution of, oh, you're an adult now, you're 18, forget everything you've taught up to now, now you've got rights and you've got privilege and you've got a voice. It doesn't work that way, which is why you get a lot of 50-year-olds, 40-year-olds talking to old school teachers and you're still referring to them as Mrs. Smith. Is because you're still in that mindset of a child going, I'm not important, I'm nobody. And it's all because of communication when we were a child. So there's all the societal, well, there's a fraction of the societal problems that's been passed down to children that we're still carrying as adults. So what is really going on when we communicate? The conversation, first of all, communication is actually education. That's what it is. It is personal education. It is education about yourself. It is education about somebody else in your life. And it is education about a situation. So it's this full, massive communication is education. It's information exchange. That's really solidly what it is. It's information exchanged. Now, we have a significant fear of the unknown. Unknown literally means a lack of education, a lack of knowledge. That's why it's called unknown, because we lack the knowledge. So the cure to the unknown is communication, because that's information that's now taking something that's an unknown and converting it over to knowledge. But in order for that transition to happen, we need words. We need communication. Now, the biggest core person that we communicate with is ourselves. 100%. We have 6 parts to our mental system, 6 people inside of our head. We have our identity, who's responsible for all of our wishes and dreams and wants and loves. And my God, does she have her own opinion on what she wants? Everyone feels it. Every time you have a desire, a dream, or a want, that's your identity talking. You have your ego. That's your conscious awareness. That is you listening to this right now. The ego has 2 jobs: to take in all of the data and to send it to the subconscious mind for processing, and to manage this whole program and situation with your 6 people. But if you're not consciously aware of it, you're not going to do a very good job managing your system, which is what's wrong with the world today, is no one is aware of their 6-part mental system, so no one knows how to manage it. And as a result, everyone's doing a terrible job managing their lives. The 3rd part is the intuition. This is the navigator who basically gives you that gut instinctive feeling of go, stop, wait, this, not a good person, pull away from this person. It's all that internal direction that you get from the outside. That's just that gut feeling that tells you, I think I need to go here. I think I need to give this person space. I just don't feel good about this situation. That's your intuition. That is 100% your intuition. The 4th part of your mind is your actual subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is not sentient. It is a computer program, an artificial intelligence that's left over from the Ice Age that just processes data. It is highly logical and very stupid. Stupid because it lacks conscious awareness, 100%, but highly logical. It only comprehends logical programming. And the subconscious mind processing your perspective, processing data for your perspective, is the reason why communication is so important. Then you have your fear system. Your fear system is the backup for when your defense system, the 6th part, falls apart. Your defense system is your communication center. And when it doesn't work, when you don't set a boundary, your fear system kicks on and becomes reactive and takes care of the situation for you. But the fear system is run off of one emotion, fear. It uses a backup emotion, guilt, to incite and move you and motivate you. The fear system runs 100% off of motivational emotions, motivator emotions. And these emotions literally push you through actions to impulsively move, act, respond, do. It's a projection of control because your defense system is down. When your defense system is up and operating and you're actually using communication and boundaries properly, you are in control because you are using your authority to access your power to take control. That's what you should be doing. That is your defense system. Unfortunately, because our parenting has conditioned us to be quiet, we're not using our boundaries. We're not using our communication system, so the defense system is down by the time we're 3 years old. And because our defense system is down by the time we're 3-year-old, fear wakes up. The fear system alerts. So now you've got a bunch of 3 and 4-year-olds terrified, running off of their fear system because mom and dad have not given us a psychologically safe place to grow. And they've not given us a psychologically safe place to talk. As a result, we grow up as very nervous, very paranoid, very hyper children with an substantial fear system that's completely out of control, that's highly reactive. So by the time you have a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, they are labeled as dramatic, they are basically gaslit by their parents, which just reaffirms with the child that they are more voiceless than they already feel, which makes their defense system quiet down even more, if it's even there at all at this point, and it makes their fear system even more hyperactive. So by the time they get to be 20, 25 years old, you've got children, adult people now, who are absolutely run by fear, conforming and hiding and shrinking to make sure that they stay under the radar to stay safe. That person then goes on to have children, and they repeat the process with their children, copying what their parents did, where they tell their children, don't talk. And it all keeps coming back to, because it's not psychologically safe to talk, you've got parents and children who don't feel safe enough to set a boundary. So words, going back to our processing center, whenever we hear a word, it goes into our data bank. It goes into our subconscious mind's processing cognitive core. There's only 3 ways that this processor receives data verbally. It either hears it from an outside source, it hears it from your internal voice, thoughts, or it hears it from your vocal cords. And that's it. So the subconscious mind works exactly like this. There's an input and an output. Because it's not sentient, it's totally logical. So it hears information, and that goes in, inputting it, and it tells it this is the behavior that's required, and it will have an output. So words go in, behavior goes out. And that's a permanent cycle of the subconscious mind. That is your cognitive core processing. Words go in, and behavior comes out. Now, if you are into manifestation, if you are looking at all in positive affirmations, you understand how powerful this is. This is why positive affirmations work. Is because you are saying and feeding your subconscious mind's input center all of this data. And as a result, your subconscious mind is processing it and putting output of behavior. So if you're working with somebody and they say to you, you can't do that, that's what the subconscious mind hears. It will take that data, put it into processing, and immediately spit out a behavior that reflects you can't do that. But when you say a boundary that contradicts that and says, excuse you, yes, I can, you're not saying it for them. You're saying it for your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind hears you say, yes, I can, and it will pause that programming that it just heard from them. Put your words in place. The last thing it hears goes into that system, and it will recondition out an appropriate behavior. So if you constantly tell yourself, I can, I can, I can, the subconscious mind will just naturally go, oh, it can, it can, it can, and it will keep spitting out the behavior to reflect the data that goes in. Monkey see, monkey do. Over and over again on processing. Now, if you grew up with parents who kept telling you, you can't, you're worthless, you're nothing, you're a disappointment, that data all went into your head, and it processed it, and it spat out a behavior to reflect the input. So you need to reverse the input by adding in your own, which is where positive affirmation and mindset comes in. Now, every time you take in data that's negative or positive, it contributes to your emotional mental environment. The more you hear emotional mental environment, positive or negative, it's going to go with whichever you hear the most of. So if you hear mostly negative, it's going to be a negative emotional mental environment. When you use positive affirmations, you are actually working to reverse the polarity from negative thinking over to positive thinking by basically injecting more positive energy into your subconscious mind via emotional mental environments so that it changes over into a positive emotional mental environment, switching your behavior. Absolutely extraordinary once you reverse the polarity. A great example that we see this is when you're living life and you're constantly thinking negative, or you're constantly vigilant, looking for negative thoughts, being mindful of how often you think negatively. So you stop and you say, oh no, this isn't how I want to think. So you have to mindfully plug in a positive thought to reverse or eliminate the negative thought. Now, some people, once they get into positive affirmation, have to do this consciously all the time. It's like you're constantly combating a flood of negative thoughts. Now, once you reverse the polarity, your subconscious mind will do it automatically. So that if you think of something negative, the subconscious mind, without you being vigilant, without you thinking about it, will automatically plug in a positive thought without you being conscious of it. And it will just feed that beautiful, constant, positivity into your mind. Yeah, it feels like a lie at first. The reason why is because you've been conditioned. It's absolute conditioning, 100%. So that when you start the positive affirmation, you are literally reversing the flow of a river. It's exactly like a salmon going upstream. So the flow is going this way of just constant negativity, and you are literally trying to reverse the flow of the river. Momentum, this is where physics come into it, where you're going to have to first match the flow of the river, and then you're going to have to do a surplus of positive to push it and redirect it the opposite direction. You are literally reversing the flow of a river. So you at first are going to require more momentum than more positive momentum to fight the current, to reverse the flow. Once you reverse the flow, it does get a lot easier, but it is an uphill battle at first because you have to reverse the flow. Understanding that this is how the negative and the positive flow in your subconscious mind goes a long way to understand how the words work, so you can really get them where you need to get them, and it's constant. I'm putting together some triliminals right now, which is subliminal messaging that I'm working with a neuroscientist on, where it's just positive affirmations. It's mental conditioning. You're literally using classical psychological conditioning or a type of brainwashing on yourself to start reversing the polarity. It takes about 3 months of constant positivity to reverse it. And it is going to feel weird at first because you're not used to it. You are contending against the familiarity. When you have a familiar environment, one that's toxic, one that's abusive, especially one that we grew up with, you're constantly surrounded by that environment. And we think comfort zone means familiar, and it's not. It's why an abused person will leave a situation and then rubber band back and go right back to it. It's not that they're looking for the comfort. They're looking for the familiarity of it. The familiarity is when you have somebody or a situation that becomes so familiar to you that it's predictable. And it's that predictability. I know how to manage this. I know how to survive this. I have the knowledge. We're back to the unknown again. I have the knowledge to maneuver this and get around it. So we gravitate constantly toward what is familiar because we have the skills and we have the rule book for that familiar situation. So when you decide to switch the polarity of your negative thinking over to positive thinking, you're changing the rule book. And that's unknown, that's scary, and you have already an established fear of communication already established inside of you because it's not known. What's positivity going to look like? What is this new world going to look like? You know what a difficult situation looks like, or you know what an abusive situation looks like, so you associate safety with what's familiar because you know that you have the skills to survive it. When in fact you do actually have the skills to develop pretty much whatever environment you want. Like any other skill, you just have to practice it. And once you practice it, it gets familiar. Once it gets familiar, you start to develop a new kind of comfortable with it, and then you get better at developing those skills. So it's not if you look at life more as I'm going to cherry pick, or I'm going to shop for what a kind of mindset in life that I want. I want this kind of a life, and you pull it off the rack. Now, it's going to require skill sets to function within that kind of an environment. You can learn any skill you want. It's going to take practice, and you need the know-how. It starts with the communication. So with words, each word has a positive and a negative energy. This is actually the opposite of what we were told. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me, is the biggest lie that we were given by our society. That's not true. Words matter. Words have their own energy. Each word has a positive to it and a negative, which is why, and if you're conscious of it, become conscious, become mindful of this. As you use words, you're going to hear the negativity. You're going to hear the positivity on a word. My favorite is humility. Very negative word. We think it's good, and it's glorified in our society to have humbleness and humility. But when you say the word, you can feel that negativity in it. It's a negative weight that really pulls you down. And the reason why is because it is totally void of self-love. And that's reflective of it. There's an idea that words come first and then action comes later. And this is not true. The action comes first and then the need for the description comes later. That's how words evolve. Furthermore, we have feelings and we have emotions long before we have the words for those emotions. The words evolve around their need for them, like muggle didn't exist 10, 20 years or 20 years ago. Now it's all over the place. Words come into existence as they are needed. They are a consequence. There's a lot of school of thought out there that words are the catalyst, and they're not. They are a consequence. Now, what happens is you have a situation. It's a positive or a negative situation. You attach a word to it, and then after a while, the word usage becomes associated with the emotion. This is how spell works. This is how manifestation works, is you are linking an emotional association to a single word. So that when you use a word, we do this when we're abused. If you have a name that you were called as a child that was abusive, you associate that negative word now with the emotion that's attached to it. For me, that word would be dramatic. It was used very negatively when I was a child, so that now when I hear the word drama or dramatic, even though I'm a theater aficionado, I hear that word and I have a significant negative response to it because it was used negatively as a tool to constantly hurt me by my parents. So now I have that association, and every time I hear the word, it carries that negativity with it because my mind learned the negative response and association with that word. So once you understand exactly that negative weight that carries with words, also that words are a consequence, you can now use words as a tool to infiltrate your own positivity into your mind. Huge, huge task you can do for yourself is write down your favorite words that give you the most positive energy and then use them in sentences, you are sentences, to infiltrate. Now this is interesting, to infiltrate your positive and your emotional mental environment. When I was talking to my friend Maury, who is the neuroscientist who's building these triliminals together, I was talking to him about positive affirmations. And he was explaining to me that I am statements are useless when it comes to switching positive affirmations in your mind. He said, of all the data that's out there, of all the scientific evidence, using an I am statement is garbage. He goes, it does nothing. Use the words you are. There is something, and I know what that is, I'll explain the psychology here in a minute. There is something about that you are statement that he says that turns your head on. So he's having me, when I write these triliminals, I have to use the words you are. You are successful. You are strong. You are not alone. Hearing the words you are really solidly, that's what embeds it right into our minds. So if you're trying to use positive affirmations and you're pulling I am statements, they're going to be not nearly as effective. According to the scientific research, not effective at all. You have to use you are statements. That is what gets that message in. The reason why is because, psychologically speaking, you have yourself, your identity, and you have a point of relativity. This is what I call the philosopher's compass. This thing is gorgeous. It is the three parts of your identity. The first part is you. It is the I of I. The second part is the you of I. This is your relativity. And the third part is your community. The first part being your I of I is who you are, it's your identity, and it's what you love. The second part is your relativity. In 5 different subjects, philosophy, psychology, mathematics, music theory, and science, you have to have 2 points, cartography, you have to have 2 points on a map to know where you are, longitude or latitude. You cannot determine where you are with any given point without having something to compare it to. In music theory, it's the 1-5 chord. You can't just have a single note. You have to have the 5 to tell you where you are in relativity to the 1 chord. We are the same way in psychology. Our relatives are our point of relativity to tell us who we are. This is a mirroring relationship where in order to know who you are, you have to look at a mirror and determine where you are in relationship to that. Unfortunately, most of our parents and family are not good points of relativity. They are terrible. Most cases you have parents who are unethical, parents who are abusive, parents who are uneducated. So now your I of I has this horrifically abusive point of relativity with which to compare to. That's not going to be helpful at all. That's horribly toxic. So you don't know who you are because your point of relativity is so toxic. And this might not vibrate with you. You just might have the logical sense to say, this isn't good. So you throw away your point of relativity because they're that toxic. Now you are without a point of relativity. To get a point of relativity, grab a hero, grab an icon, grab a therapist. This is what they are for. This is exactly what a therapist is. A therapist is a temporary point of relativity so you can determine who you are in relationship to an ethical compass. This is your ethical compass. If you don't have a therapist, then I used Abigail Adams. I adore the woman in history. I love her to pieces. So I was able to use Abigail Adams as my point of relativity growing up because my family was so toxic. So when I needed a point of ethical compass, I went by Abigail Adams' writing. I went by her mindset. And I was able to build my mindset off of Abigail Adams because I went, you know what? I cherry picked it. Cherry pick yours. If you don't have a point of relativity, cherry pick one that you idolize, somebody that you can look up to. Make that person your point of relativity. If you can get a therapist, do so. The therapist becomes your point of relativity, so you now have an ethical compass. That way you can start mirroring your desired behavior off of this person. Now, when that ends up happening, you solidify. It's literally like a person, an individual's mind is a three-legged stool. To not have a community or a point of relativity is to have a three-legged stool with only one leg. You can balance on it, but you're going to require a lot of energy, a lot of work, which is like why life is so hard if you don't have a point of relativity or you don't have a community. By the way, point of relativity is why we refer to them as relatives, is because they are the point of relationship to you so you know where you are in the world. So if you have to supplant your point of relativity, do so with an idealized model, someone who shares your ethics or someone whose ethics you wish you had. Great place to start. Community is another huge part of it. It does not have to be a huge community. And if you are looking for a community, I have one. This is why I built Authenticity City and the Healing Garden, is to provide people during this process with a community so that they would have one of these three parts to their identity. So yourself, your point of relativity, your idol, your hero, your therapist, and then your community. This will complete basically your identity so that you can heal. Life will become much easier for you and you can start going through the 6 stages of growth effectively with all the support you need. It's astounding when you have all of these come together. So with communication, once you understand that words have this massive weight of negative and positive energy to them, you can start using them literally to cherry pick and start putting them together however you need so that you have the ability to fall upon each other and create what kind of an environment that you're wanting. Communication and words are meant for your subconscious mind. They are meant to reinforce your perspective. A perspective is the core of who we are, where we're going in life, how we view reality. It is 100% built off of our imagination. When all of that comes together, you form this solid comprehension of who you are and what's going on in life. And all of it is defined off of our communication, what words we use to understand, to validate, to empathize, what words we use to connect together so that we can comprehend what it is we are dealing with. The better we practice communication, the more we practice communication, the more we are able to articulate exactly what the problem is. Like any other life skill, words is something that we have to practice to get better at. It is literally equivalent to a human being walking. But because there is so much abuse revolved around communication, we're not developing the skill as children. For some perspective, one that I recently came to the realization of, because my communication was so abysmal, I decided to start a podcast in an attempt to start, there were many reasons, but a simplified version of why I did it was because I wanted to get better at talking. So I started a podcast. I overcame my fear of stage, my fear of voice, my fear of talking, my fear of singing publicly. And I was able to put all of that into my podcast. When I put all of that into my podcast and I was able to push that out there, I started to realize that it got easier. It got much easier. And about 8 to 9 months in, something clicked inside of my mind, and suddenly my podcasts that were an hour long to talk about one point condensed down to a 20-minute podcast where I talked about 5 different massive topics. And it's because I practiced communication so much that I was finally able to effectively communicate and articulate what I needed with little to no mindfulness or effort on it. When that occurred, I realized that my improvisation kicked in. These are all communication skills that are stunted in our growth because we are taught at 2 and 3 years old that we are not allowed to talk. So as an adult, picking up this skill set, talking, even if it's talking to yourself, get yourself a podcast, get yourself a situation where you are just talking. Record your voice on a tape recorder, on a note recorder, something. Just get yourself in the habit of talking. The more you talk, the better you get at it. The better you get at it, the more effective your communication skills get. When you are tapping into your communication, you are actually linking and tapping into your identity, which is, in almost most cases, in a lot of cases, is the most neglected part of us. When we are abused, our primary message that is received is that it is not safe to be ourselves. We become our own trigger for trauma by being ourselves. Our self becomes a trigger. And when that happens, every time we act like our authentic selves, we have a trigger that goes off saying you're in danger now. So we throw away our identity to keep ourselves safe by wearing a mask and by lying. And this is why. Is because we associate danger with the authentic identity. Communication is 100% the defense system, and it is 100% a part of our identity. So when you start talking, you are actually channeling your identity, and you're giving voice to the voiceless, silent, abused part of yourself, which brings it out, which allows it to come forward. You've got to know that it's psychologically safe for you to do this. In order to pull this off, you have to convince yourself, your fear system, that it is safe now to come out. Now, the question is it really safe? Are you in a situation or an environment where the people around you are abusing you? Do you have safe people around you? If you do, then you need to start the mental work of reconditioning the programming and telling yourself, hey, it's time to come out now. It's okay to be seen. And if you're not there yet, if you are in a situation where you legitimately are abused, get out. If you're talking about money again, where money's a problem, I'm working on that. There are programs available, and it's mostly just building up your resources, doing what you can to get a job, seeing if you can't help, if there are friends in your community who can help you relocate. And I am doing my own thing with the Healing Garden in Authenticity City to start putting together some sort of a healing home so that people who need a change of environment where they're safe will have a physical place that they can come to. If you are in a position to get yourself out, do so. Get out. Get your own apartment. Get away from people. See if you can't room up with somebody who is safe, who is in a better mental mindset. See if there's any kind of a fostering program available so that you can move into a situation where you are safe. Once you get into a safe environment, get to work on teaching yourself that it's safe now to come out, that it's okay to be seen. There's a lot of stuff back there. It all keeps coming down to the fear of the unknown. You're not safe enough to be seen, not safe enough to speak, not safe enough to relax. That's a big one, not safe enough to relax. There are a lot of hidden fears that we don't talk about. When you talk, it validates. That is a big part of it. When you talk, you understand. That's another huge part of it. When you understand, you define, and when you define, you name. When you go through these processes, the validation, the understanding, the definition, and the naming, these are vast, powerful tools that tell your perspective, this is. It's solid and it's stable, and it keeps coming back to the validation, the understanding, the definition, and the naming, which all is linked to communication. I'm going to leave it here. There's a lot here. And then next time I do one of these courses, I'm going to elaborate more on communication and how to get over these fears, because communication and fear are so tightly woven together. If you are in an abusive situation that you cannot get out of, there are two massive things that you must understand. Hope that the situation will improve, that you will be able to get out. Realistic comprehension of what you're dealing with. Understanding the abuse that you are enduring on a day-to-day basis, and hope that it's not going to last forever. That combination is that sweet spot that keeps you going, keeps you grounded, and keeps you away from depression. Realistic, down-to-earth understanding of the abuse and the danger you are in, understanding the mind of your abuser, flipping it around, and hope, belief that it will not last forever. That combination is priceless when you are in a situation that is abusive that you cannot get out of. Keep those two things close to you. Keep your abuser in perspective. Iron up and don't let them get inside your head. Your mind is absolutely more vital than your heart and any physical organ you have in your body. Your mind is more important than your brain. It really is. It is the be-all, end-all of your mental sanity and your health. By understanding who and what your abuser is, the tactics they're using and what they are doing, and by staying hopeful that the situation will not last forever, it grounds you with all the tools you need to maneuver the abuse safely, intelligently, and putting yourself in a position where you can mentally armor up so that their abuse and their garbage can't penetrate your perspective or your mindset. I'm going to be talking more about that later. If you need help, if you're looking to reach out, if you want to talk more on this, if you have any questions, I am 100% available via DM. You can comment below and I can reach out to you. You can also just DM me. Thank you so much, and may the kindest of words always find you.